You join me on a Sunday jamming out to some tunes. This is more for documentation than anything. Uh, and the few of you who may know this hoodie, I used to wear it all the time my final year in uni. And this week has been weirdly cyclical in that sense. Not just in terms of like, there's a lot of elements that are similar, but so different, things that I've like looped around to understand. Uh, yeah. The best place to start, really, I guess, is actually, again, for those of you who know the backstory behind this hoodie. It's people, there's been an unprecedented amount of opportunity this week to work with people, but also so much more important that I am diligent in who I trust and like play that political game, which I always used to say that I was good at, and I used to say that I enjoyed, whereas I am good at, but only now if I like want to, and the problem is my exposure has been so high that I do lose a bit of that, of like the desire to play the game. And I realize in that there was actually a hypocrisy somewhere, which is I personally don't judge on intent. I judge on the effect. And yet a lot of my actions in this arena were at least part measured by intent, in the sense that I cared less about the outcome because I knew if need be I could justify it with intent. And that hypocrisy just shed light on why I've kind of drawn out of that game. I could, and this sounds bad, manipulate people into the place that they would be most useful for both myself and them, to be honest with you, if I filtered my intentions through outputs, like what I intended or desired to happen, rather than what I intended and what I said, to better telegraph that outcome. But a subfacet of that I kind of came to terms with this week, and just while I was making coffee, is that I've kind of had this ego bravado, and I've told a lot of my team like ego is a good thing. But I also realized that I've been using the word ego to attribute a character that I used to think was ego, but is not actually. Because now that I've kind of curated a winner's circle, if you will, it's been maybe even a year, I was going to say months, since I've said something that someone has genuinely taken as egotistical. Because if you put yourself in that environment, everyone wants you to win, but everyone just has higher standards for you and themselves. So all of it is a display of results on a path. None of it is ever assumed or received as you've made it, or that you're losing humility by being proud of and like owning the shit that you've accomplished. So I do have to twist that, which is conviction is necessary. Ego is simply the dress that you put confidence and conviction in. And I would say it is a direct byproduct of your immediate network. And therefore, on that metric, I would be very cautious, and I'll continue to do so in ascribing things egotistical when they may not be. I'm very comfortable with the concept, that's not the point. But allowing yourself to use communication of basically your old reality to ascribe the new one. Because basically what you're doing is you're increasing the latency between your perception and your actual reality, right? And the bigger that latency gets, the more distorted the connection between the two. And I'm left thinking about people again in the circle that I'm in. It is my choice, and I've come to terms with being the typical masculine figure, which to me is the epitome of choice. I can choose to suffer and sacrifice in pursuit of the greater good, the impossible, whatever you want to define that black box. And with that choice comes the choice of what people you will allow to feed into that and curate that environment. And all that has meant for me, particularly this week, is that you actually have to be very aggressive. And to recoin my own advice, be a bit selfish with your time and who you surround yourself with. It's not that it is a them problem. None of it has to be personal. But you do have to take it personally when you waste your own time. And that is allowing space for people who don't serve you in one way or another. And you're just going to end up resenting them, and they're going to end up resenting you if you try and force that quid pro quo relationship. But it landed me right back at really the crux of this week, which is even in that communication. That's why I fell in love with sales. Well, I still am. And again, the subtext of this masculinity, I've had an ungodly amount of pressure on me lately. And I revel in that. I really do. But it has really concentrated and brought into sharp focus exactly what I need in order to sustain that, given that is something that I do want and that I am actively chasing, which is intentionally placing the people that are going to serve me to achieve and ultimately not just sustain, but proof and concentrate even further. This kind of pressure cooker of business, this trajectory that I'm on, and vice versa, obviously. Just brought into focus a lot of difficult questions as well about people you once valued, and you realize that your criteria for value, your matrix of decision making there, has changed. And then you actually have to follow through with that. Otherwise, you're doing yourself a disservice. The other thing, the more tactical thing on that, those choices, sales is a communication skill, and a meta concept that should be way too important for me to have let slip in priorities, is inputs. Raw inputs. Which is, I'm effectively the exclusive revenue inflow for both my businesses, which is a privilege. That pressure is a privilege. It satisfies my matrix for decision making, which is it's something that feeds me pride rather than happiness. Although I haven't been taking it seriously enough. And it's this weird dichotomy of balance, which is an overcorrection in gratitude, almost makes you complacent. but you don't want to lose the gratitude and pride you have, because that is also fuel. And it comes down to simply not executing on those inputs, which is like everyone over indexes on mapping out or thinking through the perfect moves on the board rather than dealing with what the board actually looks like in the very next move. Mental masturbation, if you will, of intelligence. And I'm engaging in a lot of that. And then the mindset behind that, which is that you can get away with the ego. Because I ascribed it as ego, and I ascribed ego as a good thing. The subtext around it that I fed myself was that there was a lot of it, and it didn't matter. And I started to use it as a crutch rather than doubling down on those inputs to upskill. So when I looked at a bunch of numbers today, I realized that I've been severely underperforming, which means doing my team a disservice, but it's shameful. It's the opposite of pride. Right? It's like to know that you left anything on the table. Not only for myself, but for my team and my family, of course. The refocus on execution, which is why this is pretty cyclical. When I started in the space, I had an SMMA, barely. And there was so much that I was using the business owner and entrepreneur title to conceal. Like that was it. I didn't even have the work capacity to understand 1% of the work that was required, except now I'm at the point where I am making more money and achieve more, and I hold such a more valuable skill set than I thought was possible at that time. And yet I'm in the same place of, holy fuck, I'm leaving everything on the table. Except I'm not going to shift, I'm going to double down. And because I know what the inputs need to be, it is simply a matter of execution. And the reason that sounds so simplistic is because of this tendency to overcomplicate everything, as I mentioned. And the best way to add layers of complexity that are effective is in the field. So either way, execution of the input is the first step. As long as the needle is moving generally in the correct direction, it doesn't matter. And have the experience to know 98 out of 100, maybe 92 out of the 100 needles that are all moving in the correct direction. Which comes to focus, which is elimination of alternatives, by the way. Shout out Hormozy. Not picking one priority, but actively deprioritizing everything else. And clarity of vision. Again, cyclical. I got into so much debt to get this started, and you lose the girl on the way up, and with that masculine frame, you can share your suffering with anyone. And that's something that I am proud of. Even when people try and draw it out of you, which only makes it worse. Because I never wanted support or empathy, I just wanted peace. To be able to channel even more of my bandwidth into the suffering, because I know the outcome that it can yield. And so much of that came from a place of lack. And now my life is so abundant and I'm so grateful for it. One of the ways to course correct, to ensure that I don't lose the gratitude, but I regain the vision is clarity of that. I'm cautious to say drive or motivation because they can be so volatile. But clarity of that forward direction to anchor the inputs rather than just being blanket improvement. Tactically, for any of you who are curious, I spent the whole week just building partnerships, things that are necessary downstream. So it's one of these things that is necessary. And I know it is because it pulled some deals across the line. But you have to be so aggressive and intentional with putting yourself back on the very next relevant step upstream, because it's so easy to get lost in perfecting the downstream, and all the while in the meantime everything upstream changes, so now this rock solid thing that you've built is no longer relevant, which leads straight back to the inputs that I need to execute on. Simple as that. Absorb the pressure because it is a privilege. Only use pride as your compass. And above all, execute the inputs.